All right. And we are live. And Ask Me Anything, this is quite different. Ask Me Anything in real time on YouTube and in Reddit. Inside the Reddit comments, you will see already CVW has posted the link to the Ask Me Anything on Reddit if you want to go ahead and get involved. This is your opportunity to ask any question at all to the team behind Adobe Audition. It's really exciting, and it's bringing the Summer of Sound to a conclusion. It's been an amazing Summer of Sound. If you've been subscribed and watching my YouTube channel, you will have seen plenty occurring around the Summer of Sound. And the giveaway is happening in under 24 hours. So it's time to get involved and get yourself in the draw to win over $10,000 worth of audio equipment. It really is a fantastic opportunity to win. mrc.fm/giveaway is the link to go to. That's mrc.fm/giveaway. And I'll actually show you on the screen some of the prizes that are up for grabs if you enter within the next, under 24 hours now. If you take a look at the giveaway, there are prizes there, not only from let me just type it in. Let me get it into my browser, mrc.fm/giveaway, and I will show you on the screen exactly what is up for grabs if you go over to the site now and make an entry. There are prizes from Adobe, from Mackie, from Epidemic Sound, from Palette, from Focusrite, from Isotope, from Heil Sound, Spreaker, Spatial, Sonics, vidIQ, New Gen Audio, SE Electronics, Fab Filter, Blue, FX Factory, Air, and Radio.co. So plenty of stuff there. That's over $10,000 prize total. So final opportunity is right now. You can even do it while the Ask Me Anything is occurring. Just go to mrc.fm/giveaway. Now, you might have seen at the very start when I started the live stream, the three amigos are here. There's let's do some introductions. So let's start with in the middle, right here, we have Durin Gleaves, the product manager for audio at Adobe. Durin, welcome.
Thanks, Mac. I don't think you took one breath during that whole intro. That was impressive, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is really exciting. The Summer of Sound has been so good. I mean, the alignment with Audition's 25th year, and just the amount of excitement and buzz it's generated. The amazing sponsors that donated the prizes. I mean, yeah, great, Adobe did, but we also, talked about Heil, Mackie donating the monitors, all that other stuff. It just everything, all the services and software and hardware. It's just almost a complete studio package for production. It's absolutely incredible. Really exciting.
Absolutely. So fantastic. So Durin's going to be here answering as many questions as possible in the next sort of, however long it lasts, maybe 30 minutes, maybe 60 minutes. Depends how long we manage to last on this live stream. Also here, senior computer scientist at Adobe, Charles Van Winkle, who had the pleasure of meeting for the first time just recently at Podcast Movement in Philadelphia. Charles, it's great to have you here on the Ask Me Anything. Welcome.
Thanks, Mike. Happy to be here.
So, and tell me what your speciality is when answering questions. What is your a real audio? Is it right to describe you as an audio geek or audio engineer? What would be the best description?
All of the above. I've been called a geek, a nerd, a guru, an engineer, pretty much all of those things.
I think
Nice.
My specialty is going to answer any of the hard technical questions that anyone can throw at us on the Reddit AMA.
Very cool indeed. Now, for some reason, Skype keeps resizing the pictures of Durin and Charles. So as the stream progresses, I will do a little resizing my end. But we're using the new Skype integration, so it's all quite new to pull in Durin and Charles on this call using the NDI integration with OBS Studio. So it's pretty fantastic that we're able to use this technology to do this. But there you go, back to the split screen with the three of us. And well, I guess let's start off, just before we get into answering some questions, by talking a little bit about the new features that are coming soon in the latest release of Adobe Audition. So many things to be excited about, but I think the new algorithms that you've licensed for denoise and de-reverb are going to be pretty super. What's been your experience of making this all happen?
Yeah, I mean that came about. Audition's always had really amazing DSP for noise reduction, for restoration, but those tools were built for audio geeks and for people who want to spend a little, spend a lot of time really getting in there. And they were frankly designed before we really had, some of this advanced machine learning that we've really seen progress the last couple of years. So what we wanted to be able to do was provide our users a real-time, super low latency, super low resource overhead, light. You can run a whole bunch of copies of these effects all at once without needing to understand what a noise print is or what spectral decay rates are or any of that stuff that we sometimes like to get in there and get our hands dirty and just tweak and fine tune for that little, a tenth of a percent extra, better result. To provide click, turn it on, move on. Not really have to think about too much about the settings. Just, is this noisy? Does this have reverb? More or less, let's get rid of it. Let's find that sweet spot between too much restoration where you start to get the artifacts and not enough where you still hear the noise and the unwanted signals. So I think these two effects are fantastic. They're licensed from, the technology is licensed from Acusonus, which is a plugin developer out in Europe, and they're some of the smartest folks we've had the pleasure of chatting with and working with. So the effects are fantastic, and I think everybody's going to really benefit from them and just end up having much better sound as a result.
That's really cool. Well, lots of questions already flowing in, and we're going to get to as many as we possibly can during the live stream, and also inside Reddit on the AMA and on the Adobe Audition subreddit as well. We'll be in there answering your questions. Leonardo Favoretto actually has asked a question directly relevant to those two new effects that you're introducing soon, denoise and de-reverb. Leonardo wants to know: is it possible to rack those effects? So I guess put them in the effects rack. Is that possible?
Yep, absolutely. They're real-time effects. They're not process effects. So you can bring them into multi-track. You can use them on clips. You can use them on tracks. You can save them as part of your effects rack presets. And they're just so simple that we actually implemented them into the Essential Sound panel in both Audition and Premiere. So they're just a checkbox and a slider of how much reduction to apply in those environments as well.
Really, really fantastic. So that's great, because I remember before it was pretty much, if you wanted to reduce noise in multitrack, it was adaptive noise reduction, which did take quite a while to adapt to the noise, right? Or a few seconds at least.
It was a learning algorithm, yeah, which makes it great when it's on a long recording and the background noise changes and the air conditioner kicks on, or an airplane flies overhead, or a car goes out and idles right outside the recording space. But for small clips that you've cut up and you're just using bits and pieces, it wasn't as effective. And so we wanted something that didn't have that learning lead-in time, that didn't need a half second to figure out what the noise was, so that you didn't hear on all your clips. That noise disappeared. How's that sound effect?
Yeah, that's it. Some weird sound design noise. And maybe it's a good opportunity to bring Charles in just to sort of wrap up on these two new effects. They have a feature called Processing Focus. And actually, Charles, maybe while you're talking about this, I'm going to try and fire it up and show it on the screen so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Processing Focus, from what I understand, it focuses on different frequencies and removes noise from different frequencies. How and when would you use something like Processing Focus on those new effects?
Well, it's basically just a simple way to sort of tailor the effect to lower frequencies or higher frequencies, or just mid-range, or just the outside. So depending, I would sort of recommend it of just try a few of the different settings to see if one of them sounds better, because ultimately the best judge of all this is going to be your ears. So if you only want to remove reverb from, the sort of middle band where most human speech is, you can focus it just on that area and leave the low lows and the high highs fine. It might be a little bit more of a natural trade-off than removing reverb across the entire frequency spectrum. Same thing with noise. If the noise is only in the low frequencies, no reason to affect or try to process anything on the high frequencies or vice versa. Now, with any of our effects, you can actually do something similar by just applying the effect in the frequency spectrogram if you're in the waveform editor. So you can actually highlight a selection in the waveform editor in the spectrogram, apply any effect that you want, and you can do it that way. I've heard that I think one of our coworkers, Matt Stegner, also answered part of this question in the YouTube chat. But that's my take on it.
Very cool indeed, yeah. And I mean, there's so much you can do with that new effect. So, or both of the denoise and de-reverb. Let's get on to something that is a bit of a hot topic, and I can actually bring it up here now. Just before we hop back to some more questions, let's talk about what people are talking about in the Adobe Audition User Voice Forum. So I've sorted it by the top ideas. Top of the list, a couple of things top of the list. Folders and bins for file management, I guess similar to Premiere Pro, and any way to use MIDI. They seem to be, I guess those are the questions that might come up again and again in the Ask Me Anything. So maybe, I don't know, let's start with Durin. Maybe you want to talk to those who would like to do Premiere Pro style folder and bin management, and also those who would like to do a little bit of MIDI. What would you say to that?
Yeah, these are certainly the two most common feature requests we've been getting for a while. Yes, to both. I mean, of course we want to build an application that's what our users want, and then there's the matter of time and resources sometimes. So when we look at something like bins, folders for management, it seems like it's a deceptively complicated request in that, and this is more on the engineering side, on the technical side rather than the user side. But we actually have a distinction between, say, what a session is and what a project is. In Premiere Pro, where you have bins and folders for managing assets, it exists within this project structure, and so it's this kind of virtual organization tool where our concept of what a session is a simpler, slimmed down version of that, and hasn't really had the concept and the framework in place for organizing assets in that way. So nobody cares about that. They would just want the problem solved. So it's something we're looking at as we've been doing a lot more work to integrate Premiere Project support into Audition and really get this amazing, transparent, lossless round trip between the two applications, which is our goal over the next year to 18 months. You're going to see a lot of those things come in as we start to be able to support that concept of a project and that concept of assets that are organized and projects or media that's organized the same way that Premiere and that communicates and shares it in the same way as well.
That's fantastic. Okay.
I'll take a breath and say, as for MIDI, if you've been a long-time user, maybe of Audition 3, you might recall we did play around, we did dabble around with MIDI a little bit and virtual instruments in that release. When we did the rewrite, that wasn't a focus for the rewrite, and since then, it's really been a matter of trying to figure out what can Adobe do that's new and valuable, because the music composition market, the MIDI creation, the DAW market, is not very large. I mean, there's a lot of people who are interested in it, but the people who go out and buy a piece of software and plugins and make songs regularly it's rather small overall, And there's a lot of people, a lot of companies, and a lot of products that have been in that space for a long time. And I would not want to spend our resources just trying to build another MIDI piano roll editor with a handful of virtual synthesizers and some VSTI support. That's going to be important as a foundation, but we're really interested in looking at what's the way that people are going to want to create music going forward, not what they've done for the last 20 years, and what's the way to bring in creators who aren't maybe musicians or aren't full-time musicians or don't want to be full-time musicians, but still have musical ideas and projects that they want to bring their musical ideas into, and how can we help them create that same sort of music that they're looking for? How can we help them realize, to coin or to cop an old Audition soundbite from one of the sample projects? How can we help them realize their musical vision? I'm really excited about a lot of the changes that we've seen, a lot of the growth that we've seen among artificial intelligence, machine learning, being able to not only generate music, but listen to music and start to understand the elements and the compositions and what makes a song by one artist or one composer unique when compared to what makes it, a song interesting that's been created by somebody else. So we're doing some research around there. We're looking at some technologies and companies that have some really cool ideas in this space as well. So I have nothing to report there, but I want to make it clear that we're not ignoring this entirely, that this is something that I think is important, and I hope to have more to share soon.
That's awesome. Fantastic. So that really nicely answers, the two most popular questions that will no doubt get posted again and again in Reddit and on the user voice forum. So that's fantastic. So maybe, Durin, now to give you a break and bring Charles in on this. I love all these Reddit and YouTube names. DJ Club Killer has asked, how do I get the voiceover compression that's right for me? Charles, with your audio engineering background, maybe you want to speak to that a little bit.
That's a tough question without actually hearing DJ Club Killer's actual voice. In the broader sense of mixing, what the advice that's often given, like if you're mixing a song, is you find something that you like, that you think sounds good, and you just sort of try and not really reverse engineer, but try and mimic it to some extent. So getting the proper compression often depends on the style that you're going for. So if you're doing commercial radio voice or some podcasts, you might actually compress it quite a bit, such that the overall level is just right up to a certain level and just stays there. But that might not necessarily be what you want for an audiobook. And the same thing for like voices in music. The way you compress hip hop vocals versus a Donizetti aria, it's going to be very different. So I think on the podcast I had you is the answer you always get from an engineer is it depends. No matter what you ask, the engineer's going to say it depends. So if you overcompress, here's the things that can go wrong depending on the style. Is one, you can add distortion if it's overcompressed or overlimited, because it's basically a softer way of clipping. You can think of it that way. The other thing that can happen with overcompression when you're also have some makeup gain is that you can hear the background noise, we'll call it pumping. So if I'm talking and I'm going above the threshold of the compressor, it's going to attenuate the volume such that it doesn't go too far over, the set threshold. If I have that setting pretty low, the makeup gain on some compressors might actually bring up the noise floor when the audio is below that threshold. So it pushes up the lows and brings down, not low frequencies, but the low amplitude sounds and brings down the higher amplitude sounds. And as the algorithm adjusts between that, you can hear the background sound go up and down as you begin to speak and stop speaking. Sometimes that effect, a little bit of it can be stylistically appropriate, but if you're listening to a podcast or other spoken word, it can actually get pretty annoying. And there's ways to get around that by also adding in a gate or adjusting different settings. But that's the effect of pumping. An easy way to hear that is if you use the speech volume leveler effect in Audition and crank up the settings. You can hear that sort of pumping, and so you want to avoid that. You can hear it with other compressors too, but just so you can hear what I'm talking about. I'm not going to try and do the self-performance that Durin can do with different background noises, but that's something that you can try.
Nice. No, that's very helpful. That's great. So moving away from compression and to 5.1 mixing for film, Automax Productions is interested to know if there are any good templates or if you provide any or plan to for 5.1 mixing for film. Any thoughts on that?
So it's been almost it's been over 20 years since we've had 5.1, and in the earlier days of 5.1, people were trying to put a lot of stuff in the back just so you get that, hey, I'm enveloped in surround, and other styles for this have sort of moved away from this and moved away from having a lot of information in the rear speakers. Some of that's technical and some of that's stylistic, and this sort of applies to 7.1 and anything else. Some of the technical reasons is that in lossy codecs, the surround channels might be compressed at a different rate than the center and the other front channels. Certainly the LFE is compressed at a lower rate because usually it has less information since it's just low frequencies. But also, for home theaters and things like that, almost nobody has an actually properly calibrated and properly spaced 5.1 system, in the home. Theaters are much more closely regulated, but most of the time they don't have, just 6 speakers. The surround channels are actually spread out among, several, if it's 5.1 or more. So as far as templates go, again, it depends on the style that you're going for. It's great for special effects to, awaken the fight or flight senses, or that very primitive part of your brain where you hear something behind you or to the side, and it helps put you into a space. Ambiences are great to put in there. For music, when I've mixed classical surround stuff in 5.1, we would usually just have the hall microphones and some of the reverb in the back, but typically when it's put everything around you, unless we're going for a special effect. Someone who does some audition training who is a much better expert in 5.1 surround mixing for film is Mark Edward Lewis, and his website is cinemasound.com. It was already mentioned in the Reddit AMA. But he's worked in Hollywood a lot more than I have, and has done some specific training modules on surround mixing in Audition. They're very good. He even found some issues with our surround panner, and either last year or the year before, I changed the algorithm in how we calculate the coefficients. If you're 30% in between the left speaker and the left surround speaker, what is the ratio between, those two speakers if you move the puck to different sides? This is a fair thing to also ask on the Audition user forums. So there's a link to that in Audition's help menu, and there's some other people that do some surround mixing for film that can answer that. But as far as just sort of getting started, just create a new session with a 5.1 master, make some audio clip tracks that are either mono or stereo if you're starting with that sort of content, and just route it and play with the surround panners. Typically for film, the dialogue is just in the center channel, and there's other stuff in the left and rights. Music can sometimes be surround because that's often non-diegetic sound, meaning that it is sound that the characters on screen don't necessarily hear, in which case you can put it all around and it's just between you and the viewer. Diegetic sound, so sound that would be in the scene, you would usually pan to where that would be in the location of the scene itself. Sound effects, again, if it's you use that to imply some motion or to sort of get the viewer's attention to something else that might not be off screen. It's a way to introduce elements sometimes.
Fantastic. That's a very comprehensive look into 5.1 mixing. So let's move on to... Go ahead, yeah.
Well, I was just going to add a couple of things. So something I've learned as I've really visited a lot of sound mixers and production facilities is they guard their session templates as their holy grail, their secrets, their golden egg. And so it can sometimes be a little bit, they're very protective of it. And for good reason, because a lot of the way that they work has grown organically over time, and they've found their own way. And that may be making 20 dialogue tracks and having 3 separate buses for routing into, a reverb return, and that they can flip on and off, and different sub buses, and then those get routed into another dialogue bus, and then they can seed those off and use sends to send those to buses, which are routing to all the different surround channels. So I don't think that there's one right solution, even for, even within the same industry or within the same kind of project that people are working on. And it's not just, for 5.1, in the Reddit thread here, B. Dumaguina, I hope I pronounced that right. He's been actually really good about, I've seen him answering questions all over the Adobe Audition subreddit for a year now. And he's been asking about 7.1 mixing support. And we get other questions around that. Sometimes it's 7.2, sometimes it's 10.1.2 or 7.1.4 and 7.1.2. So there's all these formats and sub-formats and all these options. And I just want to mention really quick, not just the 7.1, but for all of these higher channelization formats and surround formats that we're actively looking at, what can we do to not have to chase each of these formats and, now we have 7.1 support, now we have 7.2 support, but come up with a more object-based approach and more general immersive and mixing environment that can then intelligently fold down to those different channelizations. It's not going as quickly as I would like, but nothing does. Yeah. But it's also something that we're keeping in mind, not just for Audition, but also how can we make this immersive mixing and really deep surround mixing better in Premiere and in some of the other applications we have. So keep an eye out for that, for communication from us on that as well.
That's fantastic. David Lewis has asked a question about podcasts, and obviously there's the metadata panel that you can bring in to Audition, which has fairly recently had a great addition where you can add the podcast artwork and bits like that. But David is asking about an email that Apple Podcasts recently sent that said you need to modify your ID3 tags of an MP3 to embed specific podcast data, such as the underlying loudness. How do I do this? Do you know anything about this, or how it's possible to add loudness data into your metadata?
So there's a few different ways that loudness metadata is embedded in files, and it can depend on the file format. I have not received the particular email, but if it's something that you'd want to have addressed in Audition, you can email it to the audio team at audbugs@adobe.com. It's AUDBUGS@adobe.com, and you can mention. Sorry, Durin, I think you were talking and I didn't get that.
I was just spelling it out. AUDBUGS@adobe.com.
That's Alpha Uniform Delta Bravo Uniform Golf Sierra at adobe.com. Anyways, and it'll probably get routed back to me to my desk, and I can look into it. I know that traditionally Apple has had their own loudness metadata. Was it the replay gain, or was that something else? But that was a particular, or sound check. You can embed the sound check metadata. I think the easiest way to do that, sound check might be possible for us when we export a file using the Apple Audio Toolbox in the Mac version of Audition, but I don't know if there is a utility or a library that we can use, or if we'd have to write the code from scratch on Windows for that. There, in the recent standards for broadcast wave, which hopefully is what Apple is suggesting here, there's a way to embed ITU loudness metadata, which we can measure in the application, and we can automatically adjust to that, but we don't embed that information into any of the standard chunks. So I'd have to read the email from Apple to know specifically what's needed, but you know, metadata is an area that many of us on the team care quite a bit about, because it's a place where Adobe is typically shined.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great. And David, if there is a new standard or a new bit of metadata that you need to include, like Charles and Durin have said, email audbugs@adobe.com, and I guess also, you know, if it's not something that currently exists, post it in the user voice forum as well. I'm just going to mix it up a little bit here. I see Lula2488 in Reddit. Charles has actually answered this question already. What's the dumbest thing your parents, this is a little off topic from audio, but what's the dumbest thing your parents have ever gotten mad at you for? And I guess I can start this. So back in the day, before audio editors like Adobe Audition existed, I would buy like cassette machines and record people and fast forward and rewind them and press record and play and hold down buttons halfway to make them sound chipmunky. That was all very annoying, but it really got to the stage of anger, I guess, for my parents when I got my very first karaoke machine. It was just like a microphone attached to, like, I guess, a tape player, and you'd play the backing tracks of popular songs, and I would sing at really loud volumes, which is really very annoying because, as most people who know me probably know, I cannot sing at all, but I would blast out across the house with this karaoke machine. I think it was the worst Christmas present they ever got for me, so they got really annoyed about that. Charles, I know you've posted an answer in Reddit. Do you want to go into yours before I maybe cross over to Durin and pose that question to Durin?
You mean not eating my peas? I mean, that was... I mean, they've gotten mad at me for some really good things, but I think that was one of the dumbest things. And as a parent now, I can kind of get it, but at the same time, like, kid just doesn't want to eat his peas. Like, let's move on.
That makes sense. How about you, Durin?
I answered this in the Reddit thread, but I got away with a lot as a kid growing up. So... and it's my dad's birthday today, so I'm going to let them both off the hook. But honestly, nice. They very rarely ever got mad at me. I don't know if that was because they were very even-tempered and very permissive or accepting, or if I was just sneaky and got away with a lot. But I'm going to say that I'm going to lean toward them being wonderful parents.
Nice.
What about the fact that you don't eat mushrooms, Durin?
Well, that broke my mom's heart. She didn't get mad at me for it, but... you know, she was an amazing cook, and lots of Italian and French cooking in the kitchen. And the fact that I would line my plate with okay, there's one I got in trouble for. Instead of just not eating the mushrooms or moving them to the side, I would ring the entire circumference of the plate with all the little mushrooms that I didn't eat. And she thought that was very inconsiderate. I thought it was decorative and a nice way of showing what I wasn't eating, but you know. Nice. Different opinions on that matter.
Nice. I'm just putting on the screen now. A couple of people have asked for the link to the email from Apple. I've actually found it in my inbox. New marketing and authoring best practices. So for any of you who are interested, they've got this bit of information here. To help your podcast sound its best on HomePod and on Apple Podcasts, we encourage you to review our new podcast's authoring best practices. Use these guidelines on formats, levels, and loudness metadata to create the best possible quality and file size trade-offs while ensuring a pleasant and distortion-free experience for your listeners. So I guess, essentially, there has been no real agreed upon loudness standard for podcasts, unlike, I guess, Spotify and such, where it's usually around minus 14 LUFS. But, I mean, Charles, do you want to maybe comment a little bit on loudness standards and, Apple now trying to make sure all podcasters are conforming to the same level?
Well, it's, again, I'll have to go into their document in a little bit more detail. I know that the Audio Engineering Society last year put out some guidelines, but it's been a little bit controversial because they gave a range within the loudness measurements that's applicable, and there's some confusion out there about what should be done if your podcast is mono versus whether your podcast is stereo. Some of it good advice, some of it I don't think is quite accurate. But the loudness standards, which are about, started being conceived about 10 years ago, originally driven by a group of broadcasters within the European Broadcasting Union to find a better way to measure loudness such that you could create guidelines for how loud certain things should be. And a lot of this was born out of the fact that typical advertisements on broadcast television and certainly worse on the web is you could be listening to a program, you set your dial to one level, and just like what we've experienced on the radio for a long time, the commercial in between, the interstitial commercial, would be way louder and try and grab your attention, and it was annoying, and broadcasters got complaints about it, so they wanted to standardize it. They did a lot of hearing and listening tests to figure out what the algorithm should be. There were various ways to measure perceived loudness. But what became the current sort of standard loudness measurements, like EBU R128 and ATSC I'm blanking on the number for that. A85. I was going to say 52, but that's codec. ITU BS 1770-4, I think we're up to, is -4. Those were born out of this research where they played a bunch of different things and asked listeners to rate, is this louder than the other? You can think of it like going to the optometrist to get fitted for glasses. Is this clear or is this not clear? Is this better or not? And they would say, is this louder or not? And then that coupled with a bunch of other things, they figured out for an algorithm for mono stereo content 5.1 and to figure out how do you compensate the measurement for the surround channels to figure out how loud it should be. A later advancement was in the loudness algorithm, if the volume is really, really low under a certain threshold, it shouldn't count towards the overall loudness. So if you have something that has long periods of silence or ambience, that shouldn't bring your overall loudness measurement down. I think in -4 it was expanded to include channelizations beyond 5.1. For our implementation, we had to go beyond the standard to figure out what the coefficient should be for non-standard sample rates, since Audition can support sample rates from 1 hertz to 10 megahertz. The playback range is smaller than that, but if you're analyzing or processing a file, we still want to be able to do the right thing. So the standards, the typical filter coefficients in the measurement is typically only written for like 48 kilohertz. But anyways, you can measure individual clips in Audition. You can measure entire files. You can measure in real time using a loudness radar meter, both the one that ships with Audition or a third-party one. And you can get one of these standardized loudness measurements that if you're submitting content for podcasts or if you're submitting content for broadcast television or something else, you can know that your level is within an acceptable range, and that hopefully downstream when you submit your file or your content, it's not going to be further processed up or down. So if you know what your downstream target is going to be, say perhaps a particular podcast system wanted everything at minus 14 LUFS. So that's 14 loudness units measured against full scale. And the loudness units, you can think of them as decibels, but the scale is slightly different. It uses this measurement algorithm. You would mix your podcast to that and make sure that you're right at that. And then hopefully your podcast will sound at the same level as the next one on someone's device, such that they're not trying to turn things up or down as they skip forward to different podcasts. That can get pretty annoying. So for people creating podcasts, it's usually a good idea to conform to these loudness measurements such that you're a good citizen, and you don't want to be that one podcast on someone's list for that day where it starts and they have to immediately turn it down. That's going to be a little bit annoying, and they might eventually unsubscribe.
Yeah, makes sense. So not too
or
loud,
turn it up.
not too
Thing.
quiet. Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic advice. And so Sprybury in Reddit has said, I'm a huge fan of Audition, just staying on the podcasting subject for a moment, but feel there are not enough learning resources for podcasters. Are there any plans to develop more Audition tutorials for podcasters? I guess podcasters often are coming into Audition or any audio editor for the first time and wondering where they start. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think you should plug yourself, Mike, for that.
Yeah, this is your chance.
Yeah. So, and I didn't pay him to ask that question, but yeah, seeing as you're on my channel now, just watch some of the tutorials. Definitely, yeah, it's plenty of stuff on there. There can always be more stuff, and that's a good question actually to ask. What about people who want to get started? For instance, Unprovable Lucas says, what skill takes less than 10 minutes to learn that everybody should learn how to do? So maybe Durin or Charles, you want to talk about like a skill that takes under 10 minutes to master in audio. What would it be?
Sure. Here's one. Microphone control.
Nice.
Keep your head about the same distance from the microphone. Talk past it, not directly at it. Don't move your head over here when you're continuing to talk, and then come back. Don't take big breaths right in the microphone. Just learn those 3 or 4 basic rules for how to speak into a microphone, and if you can get a good recording right up front, well, I hope it doesn't put us out of business, but it goes a long ways toward meaning you have to do less post-production. You have to learn less restoration and editing techniques because you have captured a great recording in the first place.
Nice, yeah, and that's important. If you can, like you say, if you can master your mic technique, there's less that you need to do in post-production. So that's a good one for Unprovable Lucas there. How about, okay, let's look at this one from Pusgurka, I think that is on Reddit. And I know that both of you have been on the Adobe Audition podcast and answered this to some extent. But maybe you want to talk to Pusgurka and say how you got interested in this industry, in the audio industry. Maybe starting with Charles here. Oh, I think we've lost audio from Charles.
No, I'm sorry, I muted myself. How I got into the industry?
Yeah.
So I mentioned this on Reddit, but basically I played piano from a young age and later moved on to percussion. And also at a young age, I had personal computers available to me and was interested in electronics, and sort of like chocolate and peanut butter. If you like that combination, they stick together pretty well and are commercially successful, and seemed like audio was the only way to go. So I started taking some classes at a community college where I grew up that had a small music studio, and learned some basic background, and later went on, did the very traditional route, went on to university and got a bachelor degree. I put together an internship in Vienna, Austria, where I worked for the Austrian Broadcasting Corporation, and assisted on recording some broadcasts at the Musikverein and the Vienna State Opera and a few other random gigs that I did there. Finished my degree, gigged a lot, worked on some independent films and some sports broadcasts, a lot of live sound during the summers, and eventually became a software tester at Adobe. I saw a job posting, and it was in the state where I grew up, and got the job. Did that for several years and decided eventually I want to switch over to programming. So I worked on a master's degree while also working at Adobe, and I've been a programmer since about 2011, and currently one of the co-leads for Audition.
Nice, fantastic. And Durin, what about you? What got you all started?
A lot like you, I think, when I was young, we had a tape recorder, cassette recorder in the house, and once I wasn't cute enough for my mom to want to record me saying funny things, then I would take tapes and record myself and record the dog and that kind of thing. At some point, maybe around 5th or 6th grade, I graduated to hot wiring our CB radio to the car battery. It was out in the garage. I found it. I figured out eventually how to wire it correctly to the car battery and talk to truckers or whoever happened to be on CB radio at the time, which wasn't a lot of people, but it was still fun to pretend that I was out there and able to chat with people who were far away. From there, in college, I did a little stint as a super late night college radio jazz DJ with no listeners, low range, no listeners, I'm sure. Then, but that got me interested in just I was always interested in tinkering and hacking, and I was a wannabe artist and musician at the time. So finding ways to bridge all of those different interests into something was a lot of fun. So I've designed MIDI systems and audio systems for large and small scale art installations that have gone to Coachella and Burning Man and other events. I've done I really enjoy the kind of artistic and creative expression side of audio production and audio creation. So that was kind of the background and kind of an ongoing interest of mine. I was involved in software and the tech industry pretty early, and once I had the opportunity to combine some of those loves, and when Adobe acquired Cool Edit Pro and turned it into Audition, I came on board really shortly after that acquisition, and I've been there ever since.
Very cool indeed. Okay, so let's take it back to Audition and some of the features there. There are quite a few questions rolling in about features and changes over the years, potentially things to come. One question here from Clive Castrahello says, I have a question. Why doesn't Adobe Audition 2014, I don't know if that's an official release, but that's as written, Adobe Audition 2014, have the dynamics option of noise gate expander like the new Adobe Audition CC 2018? Is that possible to do? So I don't know, Durin, if you want to take this, I'm imagining he's referring to the dynamics effect that was a legacy from Premiere. Am I right?
There was the Premiere had a lot of audio plugins that were licensed and developed separately from Auditions. Auditions had come from, essentially before we acquired Cool Edit Pro. And one of the long was dynamics, and it was a very simple compressor, very simple auto gain, very simple limiter. But it worked well for what it did. The UI may not have been up to my highfalutin dilettante standards, but the effect worked well. When we, as part of our goal for consolidating a lot of the shared foundation between our different applications so that we can start doing more interesting things like project sharing and collaboration, we made the choice to bring all of Audition's audio plugins into Premiere and make them the default plugins. And that as a result, the old dynamics effect that was in Premiere was deprecated at the time in favor of Audition's dynamics processing effect, which was a really great compressor, but it's also far more complicated than what the old dynamics effect that they were used to. Silly us thought that nobody would notice, that this would just be, oh great, we have this great new effect that does a lot more. But of course, people like what they're used to, and a lot of users simply don't want to learn a more complicated version of something they were getting the results that they were looking for. So we did offer, the next release did offer a new updated plugin. It was new to Audition. It was sort of a rebuild of that Dynamics plugin for Premiere users, and it offered the same UI, the same functionality, pretty much the same results, although it's still going through our newer compressor DSP. And hopefully everybody's happy with it. We haven't heard a lot of complaints since it came out. It's a really, and I know you've been using it in a lot of interesting ways, and so it's great to see that it's been adopted by folks like yourself who could have your pick of whatever compressor you wanted to use.
I love it. I think it's fantastic. So yeah, that's good to hear. And yeah, obviously the noise gate feature in there, I think, is just fantastic, because before I think I was playing around in dynamics processing and trying to set up a noise gate that way. So it's far easier, especially the lights that switch on, the red, yellow, and green, making it very easy. So let's talk to Manu Martin, who asked this question: when recording an interview, just voice without a mixer, just a smartphone, how do you make sure... Oh, that's nice. Michael's just given a super chat. Thank you, Michael. So Manu's asking, how do you make sure you stay within -9 to -12 dB, so that later you'll be able to edit in Adobe Audition? So I guess he's talking about keeping your levels between a certain range when recording into a smartphone. Any thoughts on that?
Recording into a smartphone. Well, I mean, it depends. Some recording apps have built-in limiters or automatic gain control. I wouldn't recommend using the automatic gain control in most tools, especially if you're going to be mixing it and editing it later. It might be fine if you're just capturing something to post very quickly. Otherwise, it comes down to practice. I guess it comes down to what I mentioned earlier: microphone control. Keeping an eye on your levels, being able to keep a consistent volume and loudness as you speak, consistent distance from the microphone, avoiding recording in areas where you're going to have outside influences on what's getting recorded, loud sounds that might come up. Somebody gets a super chat in the middle, and all of a sudden there's this big cheer. I think that's it's a fundamental skill. It's not something that's necessarily built in, but it's certainly something that you can shoot for a certain level while you're recording, and then use compressors or limiters after the fact to make sure that everything is sort of smoothed out, even those areas where maybe you were quieter or you didn't capture quite what you were hoping to capture.
That's cool. Great. Well, there are so many questions. I know we're going to get the chance to squeeze a few more in. I think we'll keep this to a nice hour-long stream. So squeeze in as many as we can in the next 8 minutes. But I think you're all going to hang around in the Reddit thread, not only over the coming minutes and hours, but as and when time allows, maybe over the coming days, and answer more questions. So let's see if we can squeeze in a few more, and let's have a look at this one. This is interesting because I've not noticed this myself. BMC00 says, I've been a fan since the Cool Edit days. Great software. Almost every part has improved with each new version, except one, I think. Time, stretch, and crunch doesn't seem to work as cleanly with CC as it has in previous versions. Is it a known problem?
I'd be very curious to know what settings you're using there. Audition now, we support 2 different algorithms for stretching in waveform, and technically 2 options in multitrack as well. The original algorithm that was in Audition 2, Audition 3, even Cool Edit Pro, is still available through the waveform stretch, time and stretch adjustment effect. But the default algorithm is Isotope's radius algorithm, which is slow, but one of the best stretch algorithms I've heard. It's really fantastic. We also use Isotope Omega, which is the real-time version of radius, as our default stretch in the multi-track environment, although you can toggle that over to the rendered mode and actually have it use the radius algorithm to pre-render that clip out, that stretch clip out. If you aren't getting the results that you're expecting, please send us a screenshot of your settings and an email and a description of what's going on. Send that to us at audbugs@adobe.com, and we'll definitely follow up.
Cool. Yeah. And a question about the stretch in multi-track. I think the maximum you can go to is like 800%. Why can't you just go on and on till infinity on that? It's kind of a question from me. Why can you not just stretch and stretch and stretch?
I don't know that the algorithm itself, Charles may know more about that. Does the algorithm itself have a cap, or that may have just been something we chose arbitrarily because of quality or design concerns? Do you know, Charles?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember which one's which, but like there's a fourth algorithm that's in Premiere Pro, and I was looking at it, like one of them can go up to 10x or 1/10x, so 1000% stretch, or the opposite. The other goes to 8x, so 800%, or 12.5%. To stretch beyond that, for normal things, you can think of transients like drum hits, or the fricative sounds in our voice, the actual impulses like T and B and D and those sort of sounds. The further stretched out they get, they start to sound unnatural. And there's some specialized stretching algorithms, if you're elongating something, that can handle transients and stretch the transients differently. So if I'm saying the word dog, I don't really necessarily want to stretch out the D and the G sound at the beginning and the end of the word, but the the vowel sound is a safer part to stretch, and it takes a really specialized algorithm to be able to stretch things differently like that. More of the music algorithms can do things like that. There's some settings you can kind of tweak to help out, but if you go too far, it is it's just more CPU resampling code that's happening, and it takes a long time. But also, you get out of a certain sweet spot. It just doesn't sound natural. Now, if you're doing sound design and you're trying to come up with new sounds, maybe you wanted to be really far, but it's kind of tough to do through the other algorithms.
That's awesome. Good answer. Really good answer. Thank you to the Penske file for a super chat as well. Really very much appreciated. Let's squeeze in a few more questions here. Actually, there's some really good ones coming in towards the end now. Okay, let's get this one in. Affinity for Sleep. Are there plans to create a mobile version of Audition? It'd be great to mix small projects on an iPad and mix on the go. Is Project Rush potentially going to be an answer to this in any way, or is that more video? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, for right now, Rush is really focused on that video creator. With audio workflows there, we're really leveraging a lot of the artificial intelligence and machine learning tools that we've developed to kind of make the audio the best it can be without having a lot of depth to some of those effects. I'll say right now, we don't have a project in the works of putting Audition on mobile. But I suspect that depending on the success of Rush and the demand from users who want to do more audio work on the go, that's Project Rush is really, as I mentioned before, we're really big at Adobe about not building everything in silos, really being able to use these shared foundations and this shared code. And part of what made Rush special was it was really this big effort across different teams to build the frameworks, to build the video player and the audio engine and the color correction. that we have in all the desktop applications to build it for iOS and Android as well. So now that effort that has been put into place, I can definitely see us in the future having mobile versions of a lot of our workflows and applications that, just like Rush, you can capture and start to work on the go, but they can still synchronize into the desktop environments for maybe deeper and more intensive workflows than mobile really allows for at this time.
Nice, really cool. Well, there are so many more really good questions coming in, but I think we'll keep the stream at a nice hour and let the discussion, the comments, the questions continue in Reddit. I know Isabella's been in the YouTube live chat. She's been posting links over to the Reddit thread, so please do follow that link and go and continue asking questions to both Durin and Charles. I'm really grateful that you made the time today to come on and do this rather unique Ask Me Anything in real time. So thank you, Durin.
This is tough. This is tough to be doing the video, watching the YouTube chat, doing the Reddit responses at the same time. So if we seem like we're a little distracted, it's because we've got 3 or 4 different things going on all at once. But I think it was fantastic. It was a lot of fun.
For me, it sort of felt like mixing in a remote truck again, where you have the director from the speaker ahead of you, the game that you're mixing, or the event that you're mixing in front of you, an A2 on the radio talking to you, and it's felt very much like that. So it's kind of fun.
There's a lot going on all at once. So, yeah, really appreciate it. And, Charles, thank you for sharing your knowledge and coming on the live stream as well. Really, very much appreciated.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So that's awesome. So do please continue posting your questions over on the Reddit thread. And remember, you can go over and check out the Summer of Sound Awesome Audio Gear giveaway. It's finishing tomorrow. Your chance to win plenty of fantastic audio products from all of the wonderful companies that you see on your screen right now. The final main prize draw is happening here on this channel. So if you're not already subscribed, hit subscribe. You'll be able to watch tomorrow. And then we will give away over $10,000 worth of audio prizes to one lucky winner. If you want to enter this draw, I know that Isabella's going to post the link in the YouTube live chat, but you can just head over to mrc.fm/giveaway. That's mrc.fm/giveaway to enter the Awesome Audio Gear giveaway. Continue to ask your questions over on Reddit. I'm going to hop over there now and chip in myself. Thank you so much for watching the live stream, and have a great day.